everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Today, we're doing a show that is part of our Crime and Author series, and here's the thumbnail. Crime and Author series, Adrian Mckinty, a really established, great writer right out of Northern Ireland, and I was surprised that he lost his thick accent, but he looks a little intimidating in that picture. He looks like a guy you might want to have a drink with, but it's clear you're going to be paying. Anyway, so with no further ado, let's welcome to the show, Adrian Mckinty. Adrian, welcome.
First of all, I take that as an insult.
I'm just...
Hey, what are you talking about? That's a deadly insult in Belfast. You know, the worst thing you can say about someone, the two worst things you can say about somebody from Belfast is, number one, he has no sense of humor. Number two, he's a guy that doesn't get his rounds in.
That's right.
Let not be said that I don't get my rounds in. I get my rounds in. When it comes to me,
I meant that as a joke more than an insult.
No, we've got off on a bad foot. That's no recovering from that.
We used to, on the police department, we used to say someone that wouldn't pick up their round that he's got short arms and deep pockets. You know, that was a little cop expression.
Yeah,
you know?
you see it all the time. Oh, it's 7:30. I have to be heading out. You're not going anywhere?
Oh yeah. Oh, when it's the guy's turn, he runs to the bathroom, right?
Yes. Oh,
like,
what happened?
It's your turn. It's your round. You know.
What happened? Oh, I missed it. You know.
Adrian, let me just give a little background to our listeners here. Adrian was born and grew up in a working-class housing project in Belfast, Northern Ireland during the worst decades of the Troubles. He attended Oxford University on a full scholarship to study philosophy. He fell in love with a girl there and followed her to New York City, where he worked as an illegal in bars and building sites and as a Teamster driver for 3 years before marrying the girl and becoming a U.S. citizen. He taught high school in Denver and Boulder before moving to Melbourne, Australia, where he decided to write full-time. His Sean Duffy series has currently sold in excess of 250,000 copies since its debut in 2012. In the last 12 months, Adrian's books have been shortlisted for the Edgar Award, Dagger Award, the Anthony Award, Thiessen Crime Novel of the Year Award, the Ned Kelly Award, and the pre-SNCF. Anyway, impressive background. But Adrian, being a writer, I would imagine it's an art form, just like acting or music or something like that. You got to work at it every single day, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I think that's completely true. I think you have to get up in the morning. You have to sit at your desk. Even if you don't get that much done, you have to just sit there and do the work. And, sit there for 2 hours and maybe you'll get one page done. Maybe you'll get one line done. But you literally have to do it every day. Otherwise, I mean, you're not a professional if you don't. You know, Stephen King is, 78 years old. Every day, Stephen King gets up at 6:30 in the morning. The guy has more money than we'll ever see in our entire lives. Every day he gets up at 6:30, sits down at his desk, and he writes for 2 hours every single day, because that's what a professional does.
So when you have to connect your ass to the seat and start writing,
yep,
does it sometimes not flow at all?
Oh, no, it almost never flows. You have to go, oh my God, this blank screen is torturing me, but I'm not getting up from the desk. The blank screen can torture me all at once too, but I'm going to stay there for my 2 hours and eventually I'll write something. And maybe that something will get deleted or never used for anything, but you've got to have the discipline, because otherwise you're an amateur. Professionals write, amateurs, you know, they don't. You've got to do it
every day. Let me ask you something. A lot of people in this country, even Irish people, I'm of Irish descent. I think my great-grandparents were from Ireland, but many people don't know that much about the Troubles. And obviously in the 90s, because Americans, we think the world revolves around America, and if you're from New York, you think even more so that things revolve around New York City. Tell us a little bit about the Troubles, because it seems like a lot of the substance in your books are the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Well, I mean, to give you a short, very brief history. So the Irish were occupied by England. And do you want me to go back to the 12th century. I'll do this super fast. So the Irish were occupied by England in 1180, and Strongbow came over, and then Ireland was occupied for the next 700 years. And eventually in the 1880s, the independence movements. And by that stage, there had been a plantation in Ireland. It was mostly Protestants and Unionists in the north, and mostly Catholics and nationalists in the south. And there was in the 1880s, it may have been possible for a home rule deal to happen for Ireland that would have got the whole Ireland out under home rule, but that under Gladstone. But unfortunately, that all fell apart during World War One. And then what was known as the First Troubles happened, when there was a civil war in Ireland in 1918 to 1921. And then the 26 counties of the South became independent. The 6 counties of the North stayed part of the UK, largely because it was majority Protestant and Unionist, and the South was majority Catholic and nationalist. So that was kind of the status quo from 1922 to about 1968, when I was born. Yeah. I'm not saying this was my fault, but everything had been peaceful for the previous 50 years. Suddenly, a new Mckinty appears in the world, and everything kicks off in Belfast, and the Protestants and Catholics in Belfast and in Derry and other cities. It's basically, I mean, there's no other way to describe it, but intercommunal warfare between streets, between houses, Protestant versus Catholic, and the British had no clue what to do. They didn't have a clue. They sent in the British Army, which was a total disaster. You send in guys who are trained for NATO fighting the Soviets to civilian cities, and of course, it's a series of disasters. There's Bloody Sunday in Derry, and the British are going, well, we thought they would be, fair arbiters between Protestants and Catholics. That lasted about 2 minutes, and the Catholics all saw them as occupiers. The whole thing falls apart, and then basically for the next 25 years, there's what euphemistically is called the Troubles. But what really, I mean, to one who grew up and was experienced, it's kind of a low-level civil war in Belfast and in Derry and in most of Northern Ireland between Protestant paramilitary groups, Catholic paramilitary groups, the police somewhat in the middle, the British Army kind of somewhat in the middle, and it's just this apocalypse for about 25 years until about 1992, when all the paramilitary groups began to realize this is getting us nowhere. There's got to be a ceasefire. And there's lots of negotiations about ceasefires. The first ceasefire happens in 92. And then in 1998, there is a universal peace agreement that everybody signs up on. And thank God for the last 27 years, just after I left.
Yeah. I guess you had a lot to do with peace.
Just after I left, there's 27 years of peace.
You know, so, Adrian, there's that great song by Phil Coulter that's practically like the Irish national anthem, the Town I Love So Well.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of tells the story of this. It's a beautiful song. I actually met Phil Coulter a couple of times, but
yeah, I'm not going to sing it, by the way. If this is
I won't sing it. I'll spare everyone.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that.
Everyone's
at a wedding or a funeral, maybe, but not here at 11:30 in the morning at a podcast.
No, you have to have 8 or 10 beers, and then you're singing along with the whole pub crowd. But anyway, that's sort of good. Anyway, with that backdrop, now comes, and here I have a copy of it right here. Hang on, St. Christopher, and this is one of many of your books, and this is sort of an investigative book with the IRA involved, the two detectives. I read one of the reviews, and it goes on to saying, oh, the cliche of the old-time detective, blah, 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 blah. But then he goes and really praises the book. I think it was written by someone in Minneapolis. I can read a little bit of it later. But so how did you get to that, from the Troubles and going into, and what gives you the background of knowing a lot about police work, about investigation, that thing that...
Well, I was never a cop. However, in my primary school and in high school, it was so funny about there was, a lot of the girls would get married, but for the boys, there was three things to do. There would be to become a cop, become a civil servant, or to immigrate. That was the basic three pathways to. You could either leave the country, which I did, or you could become a cop, or you could, work in the civil service or whatever. And that's because there's no other jobs available. So I knew so many cops. So many kids in my high school class became cops. So I just grew up around cops. So many of my friends were cops. So that whole world was just very, very familiar to me.
And in Ireland, isn't it called Garda? And I can't pronounce the second word. Garda. Shikana. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Guardians of the Peace, right? Is that what it means?
Yeah. Well, they call them the Peelers.
Okay.
After Robert Peel, who founded the original English police force and the original Irish police force, Robert Peel. So everybody just calls them the Peelers. Here come the Peelers, or here come the cops.
Well, a horrible disparate term that came over to the United States was calling the paddy wagon. And the paddy wagon was all the Irish drunks getting locked up, and they named it after them.
Yeah.
To this day, it's called the paddy wagon.
We still use that. The paddy wagon, or I'm trying to think of others. There's other ones that I can't repeat in a family podcast that people would use for the cops. But yeah, I knew a lot of police officers, so that's how I became familiar with that world. And then about 10 years ago, I'd been writing crime fiction for about 7 or 8 years before that, and I'd written about every single place I'd ever lived. I'd written books in America, I'd written books set in England, but I'd never written about Northern Ireland because I'd been told it was box office poison. They'd actually, I remember a famous English publisher said to me, don't write about Northern Ireland because nobody in Northern Ireland will ever buy those books. Everybody in Republic of Ireland wants to pretend that what's been happening up in Northern Ireland doesn't exist.
Right.
So nobody in England will ever buy a book set in Northern Ireland, and forget trying to sell these books in America because they still think it's the quiet man going on over here. So just forget about it. So for about 7 or 8 years, I did forget about it. And then I thought, my God, this was my life for like 2 decades. It's a thing I know so well. I know this world. I know these police officers. It's interesting. If I try really, really hard, I can make it interesting and maybe try and make it commercial. So I thought, the hell with it. I'm going to write these books anyway. And I wrote the first one as a standalone just in case it didn't go anywhere. And then much to my, and I have to admit, the publisher's amazement, people actually bought the book and they said, well, what about another one? And so now the one that's just coming out tomorrow is book number 8. So
the book I just mentioned, Hang On St. Christopher's, coming out tomorrow.
Yes, coming out tomorrow.
So this is so apropos. We had the podcast the day before. This should crush sales. You should be all over. I might forget about it.
Forget about it. Yeah, it's exactly. But
I'm like up to 86,000 subscribers, so you never know. It could help a little bit, So.
Well, that's the thing. How do you keep a 8-book series fresh? I think for other people it might be a problem, but Northern Ireland was so crazy and so mad that there's so many stories to tell that has not been a problem at all.
Adrian, let me just read from Amazon the little blurb. New York Times bestselling author Adrian Mckinty continues the Edgar Award-winning Sean Duffy series with Hang On St. Christopher. Rain-slicked streets, riots, murder, chaos. It's July 1992, and the troubles in Northern Ireland are still grinding on after 25 apocalyptic years. Detective Inspector Sean Duffy got his family safely over the water to Scotland, to shortbread land. Duffy's a part-timer now, only returning to Belfast 6 days a month to get his pension. It's an easy gig if he can keep his head down. But then a murder case falls into his lap while his protege is on holiday in Spain. Carjacking gone wrong and the death of a solitary middle-aged painter. But something's not right. And as Duffy probes, he discovers the painter was an IRA assassin. So the question becomes, who hit the hitman and why? This is Duffy's most violent and dangerous case yet, and the whole future of the burgeoning peace process may depend upon it. Based on true events, Duffy must unentangle parallel operations by the CIA, MI5, and Special Branch. Duffy attempts to bring a killer to justice while trying to keep himself and his team alive as everything unravels around them. They might not all make it out of this one. Dun, 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 dun.
And the only thing that I don't know who wrote that, but that was actually a very good summary.
Yes, it was. It was. I mean, it make you want to read the book, which I'm sure
the Amazon summary. They did an excellent job.
Yes, it was.
But and also the other thing that it's about everything that happens in the book is about 70% true. So it's all CIA were involved, MI5 were involved. There were all these secret negotiations behind the scenes. There was a lot of hits, violent hits before, they got rid of all the hardliners. They were all kind of assassinated in the 12 months leading up to the peace process in mysterious circumstances. So it's all add to that it's roughly a true story as well.
Adrian, were the people that lived in Northern Ireland that were involved in the IRA, were they known, or was it so clandestine that?
No, they were complete. Everything was completely known. Did you hear about that book that came out last year called Say Nothing? Okay, so this book comes out and it wins the Pulitzer Prize, or is shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize, and they made a TV series out of it, and it was super famous. And it was about this guy from Harvard and the New Yorker, and he goes to Northern Ireland and he discovers that Jerry Adams was involved in the disappearance of I'm not gonna say her name, this lady in West Belfast in 1971. And he comes back and he writes this book called Say Nothing, and he does it like he's uncovered this incredible secret that nobody has known about, and the reviews are off the charts. The New Yorker goes, "Oh my God." And I was just going, wait a second, everybody in Belfast knows this story. We all know this story. A 5-year-old child on the corner, we all know it. And he wrote this book like he was doing this weird anthropological novel from the 30s, like coming of age in Samoa, like a guy from Harvard, super posh private school, comes to Belfast, talks to all these thick paddies, discovers this secret knowledge, comes back and then tells America. And we're all going, wait a sec, what are you talking about? There's no secret. We know all this. All the players were known. All the paramilitary commanders were known. Everybody knew my Jerry Adams was my aunt was Jerry Adams's optician. And Belfast is such a small world. You cannot keep anything a secret from anybody. Everybody knows everything. Right. So there were no secrets. So yeah, absolutely.
I just have a memory of a kid, and I don't know where this is from, but of some IRA terrorists putting bombs in restaurants and killing a lot of innocent people.
Yeah.
How often did that happen?
Oh, all the time. Look, I remember this. There was this terrible firebombing called the Le Mans House bombing. I think like 18 people were burned to death because they planted incendiaries, and they planted the incendiaries at the fire exits. So the fire exits were the first to go up. So all these people were burned to death. And that kind of thing happened. I don't know. There was something every week. There was either a riot or a shooting or a bombing. I'll tell you a funny story. I used to get a lift to school. We didn't have a car, and people down the road from us had a car. And so they used to give me and my little brother a lift to school with this guy's son. And he was a major in the British Army. And in the mid-'80s, the IRA got very, very good at developing this technology called a mercury tilt switch bomb. And they would put it under the driver's seat of a car. And it was a vial of mercury connected to a spark, connected to plastic explosive, about 2 pounds of Semtex plastic explosive. And the beauty of the mercury tilt switch bomb is it could just sit under your car forever, like for a month. And then eventually you'd have to get in and drive your car. And eventually, because it's Ireland, you'll get to some kind of slope, a slope of a hill, and then the mercury will go down the vial, and then the sparks will connect, and they'll send the charge to the igniter, and the igniter will send the to the Semtex, and it will completely destroy the car. You know what 2 pounds of plastic explosive can do to a car. And so every day, so the IRA killed tons of cops and soldiers that way until people got wise. And they said, so it was a new standing order went out for everybody in the army, everybody in the police force. Every day, you have to, before you get in your car, you have to look under your car.
Right.
You just get down on your hands and knees and look under your car, because these things are quite bulky, because you have to have the mercury tilt switch device plus the plastic explosive. It can't be easily concealed under a car. And so the way to deal with it was you just look under your car every day. And so every day, this guy who was a major in the British Army would give me and my little brother a lift to school in the mornings, and he would say, "Wait in the house, lads." And he would go and look under his car for this mercury tilt switch bomb. And he would do it every day, except the days when he didn't. When it was like raining or snowing, he couldn't be bothered. So he would just go, let's go. I'm sure it'll be fine. And we'd get in the car, and he'd be in the front seat with his son next to him. And me and my little brother would be in the back seat. My little brother was always listening to his Walkman and reading comics. And I'd be sitting in the back seat just going, wait a minute. We didn't look under the seat today?
This is Russian roulette.
Hell, this is totally Russian roulette. You're a target. You're a major. You're a high-ranking officer in the army. Of course they want to kill you. And then we're going to be collateral damage here in the back seat. If I live, I'll get my bloody legs blown off or something. What the hell? And then we'd be driving, it'd be flat. And then we'd eventually, the hill of the school, of course, was the top of this big hill. So we reached the bottom of the slope of the hill. And I just go, right now, the mercury is going down the little flat hill, and it's about to hit the contacts. And this is my last moment on Earth next to these idiots. This guy
didn't check the underside of his car.
Yeah, this guy driving the car, my idiot brother who's oblivious, reading his comics, and I'm the only one who's aware, and I'm gonna die next to these fools. Having never had a drink, having never lost my virginity. This is ridiculous.
That would have been a terrible life.
So that would happen like 3 or 4 times a year when he would just not do it, and I'd be so terrified. And of course, that's the other thing about Northern Ireland is everyone's got this weird politeness thing. Like you can never refuse a cup of tea. You can never refuse a drink. And then you can never sort of raise these awkward issues. I would never say, excuse me, shouldn't you stop the car and get out and maybe have a look to see if there's 2 pounds of plastic explosive under your seat?
Right.
So you would never, ever do that. So,
but Adrian, because of this and because of all the people that, after all, the IRA were terrorists. Was there any sympathy in Northern Ireland toward the IRA?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that. Well, I mean, the thing is, I would say there was 100% sympathy among the Catholic community when it started out, from let's say 68 to about 72, because they're our side, they're fighting the Brits, blah blah blah. But then, how do you raise money? And one of the ways you raise money is protection rackets. One of the ways you raise money is that you deal drugs. And another way you raise money is you're the police. You don't go to the police, you go to us. You're the enforcers. Right. So by the mid 80s, it had, like, I would say for everybody that was in it for Irish freedom, there was 3 more who were in it for drugs, money, protection rackets.
Being a gangster,
being a gangster. Yeah. So it was like, North Jersey. It was just that world. You were in it for the perks and the money and and everything else, and everybody knew that.
Well, what's scary to me about that too is that all these terrorist organizations align with each other.
Yeah.
IRA, Al Qaeda, all these other terrorist organizations, they will do work for each other.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
will help each other out, and that's
well, I mean, people don't realize that in the 80s, or probably you do, but Bill, the IRA used to go train in Libya. Like they would send their guys off to train with Gaddafi. Because Gaddafi had, you can't train with a rocket propelled grenade in Belfast.
Right.
Where can you go train with a RPG-7? Well, you send your guys off to Libya, and Gaddafi will teach you how to fire AK-47s. He'll teach you how to fire RPGs. He'll teach you how to use Czech Semtex. So the whole Libyan connection, don't even get me started. That's a whole other story. And the Soviet connection as well.
Right.
Soviets were sponsoring ETA, Red Brigade, IRA all throughout much of the 80s. Indirect payments and also training and also weapons. I mean, why are the IRA firing AKs? Why are they using AKs? Because they're getting them from Russia.
Didn't Russia have Kalashnikovs? Wasn't that what
the Kalashnikov, AK-47.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was that was the Russian version of an AK-47.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
was in America during the Vietnam era, they used to use an M16. I don't think they use that anymore. There's probably a better version, a more powerful version. But
they still use the. I know that they still use a version of the M16.
Right.
Now, but
those guns are firing 30 cal, I guess, maybe 40 caliber, which probably.
Yeah, all I know is that I went to a firing range once and I fired an AK-47, a Kalashnikov, and first of all, that rifle is incredibly heavy because they're made to be really bulky, so it's mostly made of wood and metal. Yeah. So the thing weighs a lot, and then also the slug is this huge slug. This thing could cut through a car door. This thing could go through trees and stuff like that. So it's quite a hefty. If I was going to Mars, that's the gun I would take with me. I'd take a Kalashnikov because when that Martian thing attacks you, you want something heavy and a big slug.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your book right now. So the idea again comes out of the Troubles, and you have this character, this Garda, inspector. Now, the inspector, the rank of inspector in Ireland is really a detective, right?
Yeah, totally different. Because I remember watching The Taking of Pelham 123, and there's a bit where
Walter Matthau, right?
Walter Matthau, and then there's a bit where the inspector shows up, and he outranks Matthau by like 3 levels. Right. And he goes, "Oh my God, you're the inspector!" And I just go, "Wow, that's like a high-ranking."
Yeah, it's 2 ranks above a captain.
Yeah, that's like a big deal to be an inspector in the NYPD, and that's not the situation. And you see, basically the lowest detective rank is detective constable, and that's like probationary detective. Maybe 1 or 2 years on the job, you're a detective constable, and then the next rank above that, maybe 2 years seniority, detective sergeant. And a lot of the grunt investigations will be done by detective sergeants, and then you're getting a little bit more serious, in charge of a squad, a team of detectives. You get detective inspector, and then you get like chief inspector, would be like, and then you sort of get more into the administrative ranks.
Right.
Superintendent.
How do Irish police feel about not carrying firearms?
Well, in the of course, in the Republic, in Northern Ireland they do. All cops have been issued with a sidearm. It was usually, I remember in the 80s, it was usually a revolver, and they were just transitioning to Glocks in the 80s. But a lot of them still had the old school 6-shot heavy revolvers.
That's what I started with, a Smith & Wesson.
Yeah, exactly.
Revolver. And then when the Washington Heights, with 38. And then when the Washington Heights, the 3-4 had 129 murders one year, they were like, maybe we should start going to 9mm, because the mutts were using like Mac 10s. They were using almost like machine gun type pistols.
Yeah.
And the cops were so outgunned up there. It was ridiculous. And slowly, I was in anti-crime, which is a plainclothes unit. Yeah. We were like, they started experimenting, giving anti-crime the 9s first. So I had a 9 early in my career, but it was experimental. And if the experiment didn't work, they were quite content to stay with the 38s. The cops weren't. The cops felt so outgunned, but the politicians were like, "Oh, they shouldn't have 9mm. Let them get killed."
Also, the idea, you could always reload. you're supposed to reload during a gunfight. You
Right.
fired your 6 shots, and you're supposed to break it open. I'm just sitting reloading.
Adrian, there was a famous case in
What the hell?
yeah, in 19, I think it was 1986. I still remember the cop's name. His name was Scott Goodell, and he was involved in a gunfight. And the guy had a 9, and he was reloading, and he
Mhm.
was executed while reloading,
Yeah.
shot right in the head. And that was one of the things that pushed New York City to go towards 9 millimeters. That he was, and they used to give us these bullshit speed loaders. Yeah, try to put a 6 rounds in
I've
your
seen
gun.
those.
You dropped the speed loader. You dropped all the rounds. It was ridiculous.
And then you're on the ground.
Yeah, searching
Rummaging.
for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, yeah. So in Northern Ireland, the early 80s, 6-shot revolvers, usually 38, and then they transitioned to 9 millimeters Glocks, I think. But still in the Republic to this day, unarmed police, and in most of England, unarmed police as well. Although not so much anymore in central London because terrorism nowadays. They have armed police, and not, I don't think, in transit situations anymore, like in railway stations and stuff like that, and airports, definitely not.
Right.
They have armed police now. But still in rural parts of England and in most of the Republic of Ireland, unarmed police. I honestly don't know how they do it.
Well, look at that thing that happened in France that one time. That newspaper where the guy came in and like executed the whole
Yeah.
staff, and then the cops responded. They got executed too because they didn't have guns. I was like, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah. Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then even in Scotland doesn't carry guns. And a contingent a few years ago, I thought how ridiculous this was. A contingent of NYPD chiefs went over to Scotland to see how they do policing without firearms. And Scotland was pushing it. Oh, we don't need guns. Dude, stop. You don't have guns, that's fine. But in New York City, all the bad guys have guns. So what are we going to go there without guns?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I feel I should. We did this before the camera, but I feel I should hold this up.
Yeah.
On camera.
That's from the 90s, that car too, I think.
No, 75.
75. Wow.
75 Plymouth Fury. With
Wow.
the little, I don't know if you can see the little 2.4.
Yeah. I have a bunch of them at home. I'm not at home right now. I'm in Florida, but I have a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have to say, this is a tangent. I like the cop cars better when it was all blue with the white. Yeah. I don't like the new.
All the white and blue.
All white. Yeah. I don't know why they do it.
No, they do it because they want to be kinder and gentler, and they think that's going to make the bad
those
guys.
Old blue cop cars were so cool, especially the old Plymouth Furies and old 70s car. Just amazing.
Well, did you ever see how the NYPD back in the day used to dress the transit? They had these leather jackets.
Oh, yeah.
So intimidating. And they were like, you can't wear those anymore. And like, cops try to get them now. Anyone have one of those old leather jackets, But
have you seen, again, this is another tangent, but I saw for the first time last summer, I saw a taxi driver on big screen. They showed it at the Museum of Modern Art. And one of the things that really struck me was how much more beautiful New York was back then in like 1975 because of all these big primary colors. The taxi cabs are so mustard yellow. The fire trucks are so red. The cop cars are so blue. And the neon, like Times Square, it's all LED lights now in Times Square. But in the old days, it's all this sort of leaking neon. It's so beautiful. And I just thought, New York, it's still great. Don't get me wrong, but it has lost something.
Well, you know what were great? Those checker cabs.
Oh, so great.
Those went but with the dinosaur. They don't exist anymore.
Occasionally you'll see them and you'll go, oh my God, but it's always in a movie shoot or it's never an actual cab for that you can hail. It's always, okay. It's just a prop car.
Adrian, I want to ask you a question that I ask all writers that come on here. And I asked it of the famous Patricia Cornwell. And I said, One of the most difficult things to write. I also asked it of Kevin Wade. I don't mean to drop names, but I got to
You're
drop.
dropping.
Well,
You're
I'm
dropping.
dropping. I'm
You're
dropping.
dropping from
That's as
10,000.
bad as saying you had the face of a guy who's not buying around.
Yeah.
So, but I asked him, how difficult is it to write dialogue, and how did you learn to do that? Because it's probably one of the hardest things a writer can do, to make the dialogue sound real, like a real conversation. Because it's easy to make it sound like it's bullshit, you know?
Yeah. I think you have to listen. You have to be a really good listener. You have to go. I mean, people say to me, oh, you just sit at your desk all day and, you read books and you write. You'd be a terrible writer if that's all you did. You have to go out into the street and hear how people talk. And you have to listen. You have to overhear at diners and bars. You have to talk to people. You can't just sit in your little room and
working on your New York accent, because you say talk like a New Yorker talk. You didn't say talk.
Hey, I'm walking here. How's that? Hey, buddy, I'm walking.
You know, when I went to college in Buffalo, I was taking this course. I forget, it was in French literature of all things. I took a course where you had to read a lot of books because
Who was your favorite? What was your favorite?
Cocteau and all those. I mean, I took Russian too, and Quiet Flows the Don.
Oh my God.
You
dirty
One Day
comic.
in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I still remember some of those books, but I remember the French literature teacher says to me, he goes, "Where are you from?" I said, I'm from New York. He goes, No, you're not. He goes, "I hear something else." I go, "All right, I'm from Long Island." He goes, "That's it." Because Long Island has a different accent than New York. And I didn't really know that, but I guess I do, because people say, "No, you have this Long Island accent." I'm like, oh.
If I could do another aside for a bit, like my kids both went to school here in Manhattan, and they're both born in America. They both went to high school here, and neither of them has a New York accent. They have just a standard American accent. It's very disappointing. And I said to them, well, does anybody at your school have a kind of an old-fashioned, cool New York accent? And they say almost nobody in Manhattan does, almost nobody in Brooklyn does. He says, but the kids who come in from the Bronx, that's where you still get the accent. Yeah. The Bronx, thank God for the Bronx, because they are staying true to the accent in the Bronx.
But Adrian, how about like certain actors that are New York born and bred? Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, James Caan. Do they not have thick New York accents, and we're just letting them get away with it?
So, as far as I'm concerned, Jimmy Caan and Al Pacino and Bob De Niro could do no wrong.
No, you're right. But
I don't care. I don't care if they're playing a French chef. Yeah. I don't care if they're playing an astronaut. It
was like Sean Connery could play.
Forget about it. They could do no wrong.
Same thing. Sean Connery could play any role, and no one questioned his accent from Wales, right?
You're a Chicago police officer. Yeah, it sounds like he just stepped off the boat from Glasgow. Right. I'm okay with that. You're Sean Connery. Do what you want, buddy.
No, I did some acting and auditioning for commercials and everything. No accents. I was like, these fuckers,
I remember going to see, it's just funny you said that. About 2 years ago, there was the anniversary of Michael Mann's Heat. And do you know that gigantic movie theater up in Washington Heights? It's a huge,
yes, and they have music.
It's like what is that one called?
170. Yeah, 175 it is.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Just off Broadway. And so they were showing Heat up there. And it was De Niro and Pacino and Michael Mann and the producer of Heat and some of the other cast. And, everybody, I think we watched the movie first.
Val Kilmer was in that too, I think.
Yeah, Val Kilmer was great in it. But it was so funny because afterwards, I thought this is hilarious because De Niro was exactly De Niro. Yeah, well, I don't know. Good question. Totally, absolutely you expected with Robert De Niro. One word answers, shrugging his shoulders, nodding his head, looking down. No, nothing. Pacino, 100% Pacino. Yeah, what do you want to know? Ask
Yeah,
what a good question. Hey, you're beautiful. You can ask a question. Just go, oh my God, these guys are exactly the way you want them to be. You know, they're exactly. De Niro was 100% De Niro, Pacino 100% Pacino. It was great.
I used to always think the best actor in the world was De Niro, but as I grew older, I think Pacino is better than him. If I had to compare the two, I'd have to
Pacino can
say,
somehow carry a not so good movie, don't you
yeah.
think? Like,
I think he's more of a chameleon, you know. I
yeah.
mean, when you see him do Scarface and you see him Scent of a Woman, where he plays that blind guy, you
Yeah.
believe he's blind. He's unbelievable.
I
You
saw
know.
this movie. Do you remember Sea of Love that came out?
Yes. That's
Sea of Love.
famous song. Come with me,
Yeah,
come my love.
Pacino's so good in that. Like, no one ever talks about that movie.
Yeah, oh, he was great.
And Pacino, but it's late.
Ellen Barkin was in that movie too.
And you know who's in it? I just watched it a few weeks ago. A very young Samuel L. Jackson.
No kidding.
They do that. It's written by Richard Pryor. They do that fantastic scheme at the start where they tell all these scofflaw guys that they've gotten.
Yes, yeah. That is actually a trick.
And they all show up.
They show up, yeah.
And they say, you're all booked. And then Samuel L. Jackson says, well, are we still getting the Yankees tickets? No.
Oh, get the hell out of here.
No, you're not.
I like that movie. That was a pretty damn good movie. You're right.
Yeah.
But so getting back to Duffy, tell us about Duffy. Who is Duffy based upon?
Duffy's based on about two different cops I knew, very young guys who joined the police and who had pretty harrowing careers. One was my little brother's best friend who joined the police and went through some scary stuff that happened to him. So it's based on those two guys. And then I guess there's about 60% of me in there. Duffy has my fashion sense and taste in music and, you know, some of my other stuff. So yeah, it's sort of a couple of guys I know and a little bit of me.
Cool. And is he, well, he's the rank of inspector, which is a detective, right? And he comes upon this case and the guy turns out to be former IRA.
And that's the way I want all the Duffy books to go is it starts off and it looks like it's fairly straightforward, and then as they dig deeper and deeper into the case, everything, as it always does, just unravels, and you go, wait a second, why were these people here and what's happening here, and this whole thing unravels right before their eyes. So I always wanted to be a mystery within a mystery and to get deeper and scarier as the case unfolds.
Do you hang out with other writers?
I do. I have.
Does that help or does that hurt?
I always think that they are, well, maybe there's a little bit of friendly competition, but I'm always intimidated by their production. Like when you got, I wrote 3,000 words today. You go, what? You wrote 3,000 words today? I got 50, so that always annoys me when it's just, I published my book in February and in September I got a novella coming out. I just wrote this short story. Just slow down. You're making the rest of us look bad.
Yeah.
I've got to go back to the wife and say, hey, honey, we're eating this year. I got one book out.
Now, your wife obviously works because a writer's wife has to work, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I said, don't worry me until Christmas. Like, we don't
know when your next payday is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that's the one thing I don't like is when they are more productive than I am. But I do enjoy because it's because they go through all the same stuff you go through. Writer's block, bad reviews and good reviews, and the publishers going under, just all the stuff that you think, oh my God, this can only happen to me, and then you go, no, happens to everybody.
When I'm obviously interested in music like you are also, and I love to hear like songwriters say, oh, I was sleeping and this idea came to me and I got up and I either went to the guitar or went to the piano. Yeah. It was a famous story, and I read his book, Keith Richards.
Yeah.
He said, I was all messed up and I was drinking and I went to bed.
Satisfaction, right?
Yes, exactly. The riff to Satisfaction, and he played it, And luckily, he said, I recorded it or I would have forgot it.
Yeah.
And in the morning, he played it, goes, oh, and that was satisfaction. Paul Simon just recently said it came to in his sleep, a whole album.
Yeah.
And he was done. He was retired. He said, but somehow divine intervention, whatever the hell it was, came to him in the middle of the night, and he would wake up and play. I think his instrument of choice would be to write songs was a guitar, but he would sometimes play piano also. Do you get moments like that, or
very rarely? Very, very sometimes. Like I wrote this. Normally for me, it's like you have an idea, you try it, it doesn't work, you score it out, you try something out. You know, it's a grind. You grind your way through a book, and it takes, I mean, usually takes me a year to write a book, you know, to do the research and do the writing, the editing, the copy. It's usually a year of grinding it out. But occasionally I'll get, like Christmas Eve, I had this idea for a short story, and I put the kids to bed, and I wrote it for about 3 hours, and it was done. And that happened. I wrote a whole book like that. I wrote a book about 4 years ago called The Chain, and that book I wrote in 90 days. I had the idea for it. I worked on it at night from like 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. for about 2.5 months, and it was done. It all just flowed. But that, for me, that is really very rare. Normally I'm a grinder and grifter and just have to
I'm a joker, I'm a smoker, and a midnight toker.
By the way, if you're interested in the Paul Simon working things out, he's on this talk show. Maybe it's the Merv Griffin show. It's on YouTube. That's why I bring it up. It's the Merv Griffin show, and he brings in an unfinished song he's been working on.
I think I've seen that.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I forgot what song. It's a famous. The song became famous.
Yeah, a completely famous song, and it's like one of those daytime talk shows or something.
Yeah, he said, "I only finished
on right now," and he just got. Now I'm not sure where this goes from here. You know, do I do this? Do I do this? And you just go, "Oh my god!" It's like Bridge Over Troubled Water or something. He's figuring it out live on the air.
Yeah,
you just go, "This is bananas."
But think of how many moving parts there are to writing a song. It's not just the musical piece you're writing. It's the words, it's the tempo, it's all of those things have to come together, and all those different parts of your brain have to sync. And it's got to be one of the hardest things on earth. So people that can do it, and there's very few people. Look at someone like Van Morrison. What a prolific songwriter he is. I think he just put out a new album.
He's still killing it.
Yeah. And he's amazing. I think he's an amazing. Bob Dylan. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't like him. Now I'm like, this guy's unbelievable. When I look at some of his stuff, I saw that movie. I forget what the movie's called about him, but incredible. And the poetry that he's written and the words, sometimes you think, oh, that was such a simple rhyme, but okay, you try to do it then, you know?
I'll tell you a funny story. So about 15 years ago, I'm in Belfast, and my little brother says, "Hey, I got tickets to go see Van Morrison." And I said, "Oh, yeah, great." So we go to see Van Morrison, and it's always, you know, I think most people know this. I'm not telling tales out of school. Van Morrison's a bit of a prickly customer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get him in a good mood, and sometimes you won't. So sometimes you'll get like a 45-minute show, and he doesn't talk to anybody, he walks off the thing. Sometimes you'll get an hour and a half, and he's joking with everybody. I'm not telling tales out of school. People know this.
Yes.
So I said, well, what van are we going to get tonight? Are we going to get the half an hour van? And you feel like you've been your money, you know, why did I pay all these? And then, so we went there, right? And he starts off with his back to the audience.
Yes, I've seen him.
For the first 3 songs, and I'm going, oh God, it's going to be one of those nights. It's going to be his back to the audience. So we're going back. And then he turns around and he starts chatting to people in the crowd, and we go, okay, he's not in such bad. And then he says this incredible thing. He says, I've got this friend who's been staying with me for a couple of days, and as you probably know, I've moved back to East Belfast. I bought a wee house there, and and Cultural, and I've had this friend staying with me on I've got a wee house there on the beach, and I hope you don't mind if he comes out and plays a few songs with me. If it's all right with you lot, and he's agreed and he doesn't mind. So everybody's going, well, yeah, Van, whatever you want. And out comes Bob Dylan.
Oh God!
I'm looking. Is that Bob Dylan? And his Van Morrison's friend, who's been staying with him for a couple of days, is Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan comes up and plays like 5 or 6 Van Morrison songs with Van Morrison, and then he just goes, thank you very much. And then,
well, there's a great video on YouTube of Van Morrison and Bob Dylan playing near the Parthenon in Greece.
Oh wow! I've got to see.
They both have a guitar and they're playing "Crazy Love." Van Morrison, "Crazy Love" together, and it was so good. I was like, how did they just show up here with 2 guitars? Obviously it was staged, but it seemed like it was almost like impromptu the way they played together. Yeah. It was really cool, and I was like, wow. And great songwriters.
There's a book I just read, and it's called Astro Weeks, an oral history of 1968, and it's all about how he wrote the Astro Weeks album. Mostly he wrote it in Manhattan and in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it's, if you want to dig deep,
I love that album. I love that album.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Amazing. And something that I find just not to make this about Van Morrison, but he's very religious, he's very spiritual, but he also likes to drink a lot, and he's he's an ornery type guy, as you said.
He is ornery.
And he can there's this famous actor I know, I won't say his name because I would not have permission to use this story, but it was, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, let's take a selfie together." And I just thought it was funny. But this actor thought it was so cool that Van Morrison asked him, "Can I take a selfie with you?" instead of the other way around.
Yeah, that would be my dream. And also, nobody would believe you.
Yeah,
you never guess what happened. I met Van Morrison in a bar, and he said, "Let's take a selfie together."
Yeah.
And then he took.
You're such a famous writer.
That's not true. That never happened. Where's your proof? No, he took it on his phone. Yeah, pull me another one.
Yeah. And would you send it to me after so I can prove this? Right?
Yeah. No one will believe you.
It's amazing, Adrian, that at the beginning of this show, I said, listen, we're just going to have a conversation, and almost 53 minutes have gone by, and that's what we've done. Yes. And there's no alcohol involved either. No. So two Irishmen, how did we talk for so long?
We've gone off in a few places, but that's the way these conversations between two mix, that's the way they always go.
That's right. Right. Common interest. I wanted to ask you one thing now that I think of it.
Sure.
You obviously had a few years behind the stick, huh? You were a bartender.
Oh, yeah. Can I tell you one story about that?
Sure.
So I meet my girlfriend, my future wife, at university, and I've got no prospects. I'm graduating with a philosophy degree. So
you're a good bullshit artist.
What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with that? And she's going back. She's on her. You Americans do this year abroad thing.
Yeah,
she's on her year.
I had to pay for it.
Yes, she's coming back to New York City, and I said to her, we haven't been dating very long, and I say to her, "Hey, could I just sort of come with you and live, maybe on your sofa in New York City? Is that a possibility?" And then she says to me, and she's very skeptical, and she says, "What will you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm Irish. Obviously, I'll get a job working in a bar." And she goes, just like that, you're going to show up, and you're just going to get a job working in a bar? And I said, "Yeah, I think that's how it works." And she said, "Okay," super skeptical. So I remember I flew in. This is the early 90s, and I flew into JFK on the Wednesday, right? So it's Wednesday night, and on the Thursday I flew in on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday and the Thursday, I start going around bars to see if they're looking for work. And this is in Manhattan, and someone says, go up to the Bronx. They need bartenders up in the Bronx. So I got to the Bronx, Riverdale part of the Bronx.
Oh, yeah, that's half
Yeah.
of Ireland.
Yeah, so I've gone something. So
Yeah.
second place I go into, and I say to them, "Hey, would you have any work for bar staff?" And the guy looks at me, he says, "What's that accent?" And I go, "Belfast." And he goes, "Well, let me ask you something. Could you start on Saturday night?" And I go, "Yes." And then he says to me, so we arrange it, and as I'm walking away, he says, "You know how to pull a pint of Guinness, don't you?" And I go, of course, I'm Irish." And immediately I get back to the apartment. I'm on the phone to my friend Noel McKee, back in Belfast. "No, how do you pour a pint of Guinness?" And he goes, "Oh, Adrian, it's not easy.
I know how to drink
It's
it.
complicated business. I couldn't even explain it to you over the phone. You're gonna have to explain it over the phone." So he explains to me how you pour a pint of Guinness, and then
What was the name of the first bar you worked at in the
I
Bronx?
can't remember the first one, but I ended up in that place, which is still there, called Anvil Bach. Do you know that one?
No,
Up
I
in
don't know that one.
it's right at the bottom of the hill. It's still there because I went there last year.
Yeah.
It's still an Irish bar, and it's right at the bottom of the hill. And I went into them and said, I used to pull pints in here. And they said, "Well, you're not getting them for free."
I tended bar at Pete's Tavern on 18th Street in Irving.
Oh, sure.
One of the most famous bars in the city. I worked there for like 3 years. Yeah.
My dream was to. What's the one where down there where you have to get the 2 drinks at the same time?
McSorley's.
McSorley's. That's my dream.
Yeah,
Working McSorley's. Because
they always argue who's the oldest bar in the city, and Pete says the oldest original bar. McSorley's is not a bar; it's an ale house. So there's all the differentiation.
But one thing I like about McSorley's is, isn't it still the rule? I haven't been in there for a while, but isn't it still the rule? It's either dark or light. That's
and
that's your choices.
I forgot what year they didn't allow women in there for years.
Oh yeah, until the 70s.
25, 30 years ago, but they did that
until the 1970s.
Yeah, one other quick question: did being a bartender help you as a writer?
Oh God, yeah, 100%, 100%. You hear the stories, especially after the midnight hour.
Yeah.
That midnight to 2 a.m. The stories that people tell you, the things that are going on in their life, men and women.
Yes.
Just you get. It's like you're their counselor, you're their shrink, you're their therapist.
Well, Adrian, they say that the society's gatekeepers are bartenders, hairdressers.
The things people tell you, trouble with their sister, trouble with their mom, family feuds. And then they'll say to you, I was like 22 or whatever. And they say, "So what do you think I should do? Do you think I should put my mom?"
I got a PhD in
I'm 22. I don't know the answer to this. You question, should I divorce my husband? Maybe you should talk to a priest about it or something.
It's the same thing with being a cop.
Please don't take my advice.
A cop can be 20 years old, 22 years old, and you're going to a domestic violence thing, and you're supposed to solve this couple's marital problems, and you're 22 years old. It's ridiculous.
I don't know. Ask me in 15 years.
Yeah. I know how to solve it. They're called handcuffs.
Yeah, exactly. So you my God, you learn about the world working. I'll tell you, I know you're heading out, but I'll tell you one funny thing that happened to me when I was up there. So the first Saturday night I'm working, or maybe the second Saturday night I'm working, I get these phone calls and they say, "Yeah, who's this?" And I go, "Oh, I'm Adrian. I'm the new barkeeper. Is Mick there?" And he says, "No, he's not there." He says, "All right, well, tell Mick, Jets over the Giants, 20 $8. This is Seamus." And I go, and I write it down. Jets over. What is that? What are you talking about? So I did this for like 5 or 6 weeks of this, and I was saying to a friend of mine who I'd met, and I says, every Saturday and Friday night, people will call in with these mysterious things, Giants of the. I figured out that it's football, but do you know what it is that they're doing? And it says, "Yeah, I know what it's called, Adrian. It's called a numbers racket." That's 3 years in a federal prison is what's going on there.
They're placing a bet.
And I go, "What are you talking about?" And they go, "Gambling is illegal. You can't. This is a numbers racket, is what you're doing." And I go, "Gambling is illegal in this country?" Yes, it is. And I go, "Oh my God." Like, not only was I getting deported, but I was also
You have handcuffs put on you.
Yeah, getting the old bracelets stuck on me.
That's right. Here we are, folks. New York Times best-selling author Adrian Mckinty, and his book comes out tomorrow, actually. And the book is called "Hang On, Saint Christopher," which is part of a series of books. And you can get the book on Amazon. And there's Adrian with his smiling face. He looks a little serious in the thumbnail. Anyway, Adrian, it was a pleasure to meet you. And I wish you the best of luck with your book and books and your future writing. And have a great day, brother.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. But we'll have a pint. Yeah. I'll see if you know how to pour a pint of Guinness.
By the way, I'm buying.
That's great.
I have to meet you in
Manhattan. Yeah. Have a great day, Adrian.
Thanks, man.
One episode just ain't enough.